Do you remember Braveheart? It once told a story of courage, freedom, and sacrifice that defined a generation. But behind the screen, the reality was far more brutal. Several beloved actors passed away in pain, heartbreak, and in ways few ever expected. Today, we remember them and honor the legacy they left behind. Patrick McGoohan as Longshanks, the merciless King Edward I in Braveheart, was played by Patrick McGoohan. At 67 years old, he embodied the English monarch as a man who ruled through calculation rather than rage, letting silence do the killing. His performance made power feel inevitable, not theatrical. That chilling restraint did not come from nowhere. Born on March 19, 1928, in New York City, Patrick Joseph McGoohan was the child of Irish immigrants who moved constantly between America, Ireland, and England. Growing up amid economic hardship during the Great Depression, he learned early that stability was temporary and authority could vanish overnight. That unsettled childhood shaped a man who trusted discipline more than emotion. As his career took shape in Britain, McGoohan became a defining face of television through Danger Man, then unsettled audiences worldwide by creating The Prisoner. His success, however, came with friction. He argued with executives, rejected lucrative roles, and famously turned down James Bond on moral grounds. Later recognition, including Emmy Awards for Columbo, brought respect but never softened his defiant independence. Off-screen, McGoohan lived by the same severe principles. Married to actress Joan Drummond from 1951 until her death, he refused to perform romantic scenes with other women, a stance that quietly narrowed his opportunities. Fame increased his isolation rather than his comfort, pushing him into a withdrawn life in Los Angeles. Patrick McGoohan died at the age of 80 on January 13, 2009, following a short illness at St. John's Health Center in Santa Monica, passing away in the early morning hours. His estimated net worth was about $10 million, a modest fortune for a man who repeatedly chose principle over popularity, leaving behind a legacy defined by conviction rather than compromise. Ian Bannen as the leper, Robert the Bruce's father. The leper, the dying father of Robert the Bruce in Braveheart, was played by Ian Bannen. At 67 years old, he gave the character a fragile authority shaped by sickness and regret. His presence felt less like acting and more like a man already half gone. That quiet gravity was rooted in a difficult beginning. Born on June 29, 1928, in Airdrie, Scotland, Ian Edmund Bannen grew up amid emotional instability and early family fracture. Raised under strict Catholic discipline, warmth was scarce and expectations were relentless. Those pressures pushed him inward, teaching him to observe rather than demand, to endure rather than escape. Bannen carried that inner tension into a demanding career. He rose through classical theater with the Royal Shakespeare Company and earned international recognition with an Academy Award nomination for The Flight of the Phoenix, followed by acclaim for The Offense. Yet the psychological weight of such roles took a toll, drawing him toward alcohol as a form of quiet self-destruction. Professional respect often came at the cost of personal stability. His marriage to Marilyn Salisbury was marked by strain as addiction eroded trust and health. Although he eventually achieved sobriety, the damage lingered, both emotionally and financially. Unlike many peers, Bannen consistently chose complex, unsettling roles over commercial security, leaving him admired but exposed as his later years approached. Ian Bannen died at the age of 71 on November 3, 1999, after a sudden car accident near Loch Ness, Scotland, when his vehicle overturned on a remote road. Death came without warning, between filming commitments, cutting his life short in an instant. He was buried privately, and his estimated net worth stood at around $5 million, a stark contrast to the depth of his artistic legacy. Sean Lawlor as Malcolm Wallace. Malcolm Wallace, the principled father of William Wallace in Braveheart, was played by Sean Lawlor. At 41 years old, he brought quiet authority and moral gravity to the role in 1995. His limited screen time carried consequences that echoed through the entire story. That emotional weight was inseparable from his origins. Born on January 25, 1954, in Dublin, Ireland, Sean Lawlor grew up in impoverished neighborhoods marked by street violence and political unrest. His father worked as a laborer, and financial instability was constant. Exposure to conflict at a young age hardened him early, leaving psychological strain beneath an outwardly controlled demeanor. Those tensions followed him into a career built more on endurance than reward. Lawlor emerged from Irish theater before gaining international notice in the Name of the Father alongside Daniel Day-Lewis, later appearing in Titanic and on Broadway. Despite working in 2 Best Picture Academy Award winners, leading roles remained elusive. The inconsistency of employment led to long periods of financial pressure and professional uncertainty. His personal life remained largely private, but stability came at a cost. Married with children in Ireland, Lawlor struggled quietly with alcohol dependence, fueled by career frustration and economic stress. While he continued producing stage work, including his one-man play, The Watchman, the strain on his health steadily worsened. Illness entered his life long before the public noticed. Sean Lawlor died at the age of 55 on October 10, 2009, in Dublin, after a prolonged battle with cancer, passing away following a short but devastating decline. His estimated net worth was approximately $2 million, modest compared to the cultural weight of his work. His death quietly closed the life of an actor whose most powerful roles were built on lived pain. Mike Mitchell as English Warrior. The unnamed English warrior in Braveheart was played by Mike Mitchell. At 39 years old in 1995, his physical presence used to embody brute force rather than dialogue. Though a minor role, his imposing frame made him instantly recognizable. That physicality was forged long before cinema. Born on August 21, 1955, in Aberdeen, Scotland, Mike Mitchell grew up in a working-class family where manual labor was unavoidable. Poverty pushed him into heavy work early, and strength became both escape and survival. Discipline in training replaced instability at home. Before acting, Mitchell built a formidable career in bodybuilding, winning Mr. Universe twice and earning multiple World Fitness Federation titles. His size led him naturally into film, where he appeared in Braveheart and later Gladiator. Behind the scenes, years of extreme physical strain took a toll, culminating in a serious heart attack in 2006 that permanently altered his pace of life. Marriage and family grounded him, but health issues never fully retreated. Despite medical warnings, Mitchell continued acting in international productions, including Dark Highlands and Dragon Kingdom, while living partly in Turkey. The combination of past physical extremes and lingering heart damage followed him quietly into later years. Mike Mitchell died at the age of 65 on July 23, 2021, after suffering a fatal heart attack while on a boat in Fethiye, Turkey, passing away suddenly with no chance for intervention. His estimated net worth was around $3 million, earned across bodybuilding, business ventures, and film work. His death shocked those who knew him as indestructible, ending a life defined by strength, but undone by the body that built it. Ralph Riach as Priest Number 1. Priest Number 1, the cleric figure in Braveheart, was played by Ralph Riach. At 56 years old, the role placed him within the film's moral framework, reinforcing the religious authority that silently legitimizes power and punishment in the story. Though brief, the appearance connected Riach to one of the most influential historical epics of the 1990s, expanding his screen visibility beyond Scottish television. That restraint was shaped long before the camera ever found him. Born on January 26, 1936, in Elgin, Scotland, Ralph Mackenzie Riach spent his childhood under the shadow of World War II, as displacement and uncertainty unsettled family life. Wartime movement and loss created early emotional tension, forcing maturity before stability could form. Those years left him observant, cautious, and inward. Unlike most actors, Riach arrived late to performance. He worked for decades as an architectural draftsman, upholsterer, and theater landlord before enrolling in drama school in Glasgow at the age of 45, the oldest student in his class. That delayed start sharpened his realism rather than limiting him. Television audiences later recognized him in Hamish Macbeth, while international viewers saw him decades later in Cloud Atlas. Following Braveheart, Riach maintained steady screen work rather than chasing prominence. He appeared in films such as The Last Legion and Death-Defying Acts, often cast as authority figures shaped by age and experience. Television continued to provide consistency, allowing him to work well into his later years. Ralph Riach died at the age of 86 on March 20th, 2022 in Scotland, from natural causes, passing away quietly after a long life removed from public spectacle. His estimated net worth was around $4 million, earned gradually through decades of continuous work. His passing marked the end of a career defined by longevity rather than visibility. Mel Gibson as William Wallace. William Wallace, the Scottish rebel at the center of Braveheart, was portrayed by Mel Gibson. At 39 years old, he carried the film not only as its leading actor but also as its director, shaping the story's emotional force and historical scale. The role became the defining pivot of his career, transforming him from action star into a filmmaker taken seriously by the industry. Born on January 3, 1956, in Peekskill, New York, Gibson grew up in a strict Catholic household marked by ideological rigidity and domestic tension. His family relocated to Australia during his adolescence, a move driven by his father's anti-government beliefs and legal disputes. The combination of religious pressure, displacement, and exposure to violence left deep psychological imprints. Before Braveheart, Gibson had already achieved global fame through Mad Max and the Lethal Weapon series, but those successes confined him to the image of an action hero. Directing Braveheart shattered that limitation, earning him 2 Academy Awards and repositioning him as a major creative force. He followed with The Passion of the Christ and Apocalypto, films that confirmed his fixation on violence, faith, and moral extremity as narrative tools rather than spectacle. His personal life unraveled publicly alongside professional triumph. A long marriage to Robin Moore ended in one of Hollywood's most expensive divorces, followed by legal disputes and leaked recordings that triggered widespread backlash. The controversy led to years of industry rejection and stalled opportunities, forcing Gibson into a prolonged exile from mainstream Hollywood despite continued work. As of 2026, Mel Gibson is 70 years old and remains active as both actor and director, with projects spanning historical drama and action cinema. His estimated net worth stands at approximately $425 million, largely built from Braveheart, The Passion of the Christ, and long-term production revenues. His legacy remains divided, celebrated for cinematic ambition, shadowed by personal collapse. Sophie Marceau as Princess Isabelle. Princess Isabelle, the French noblewoman navigating power and survival in Braveheart, was played by Sophie Marceau. At 29 years old, she brought international visibility and emotional counterbalance to the film's brutality. The role marked her definitive transition from European star to global actress. That poise was forged early. Born on November 17, 1966, in Paris, Marceau grew up in a working-class household with a truck driver father and shop assistant mother whose early divorce destabilized her childhood. Financial limitation and family fracture pushed her toward independence at a young age. Acting became a means of control rather than escape. Marceau had already conquered European cinema through La Boum, but Braveheart expanded her reach beyond France. She followed it with Firelight and Anna Karenina, then entered blockbuster territory as Electra King in The World Is Not Enough. Unlike many contemporaries, she resisted Hollywood permanence, choosing to alternate international roles with French films centered on moral and social conflict. Her personal life intersected repeatedly with her work. A long relationship with director Andrzej Żuławski ended in separation, followed by other high-profile partnerships and motherhood. Rather than retreating, Marceau diversified. Writing novels, directing films, and refusing state honors she felt conflicted about. As of 2026, Sophie Marceau is 60 years old and continues working selectively across film, literature, and directing. Her estimated net worth is around $50 million, built from decades of sustained success across European and international cinema. Her career stands as one of rare balance: fame without surrender, longevity without erasure. Brendan Gleeson as Hamish, William Wallace's closest friend and fiercest ally in Braveheart, was played by Brendan Gleeson. At 40 years old, he gave the film its most human second heartbeat, the man who keeps Wallace grounded when the story threatens to turn into pure legend. For Gleeson, that role quietly opened the international door. Suddenly, Hollywood knew his face, his weight, his warmth, and how devastating he could be when loyalty turns to loss. Born on March 29, 1955, in Dublin, Ireland, Gleeson grew up under strict Catholic schooling, bright and bookish, but carrying pressure he didn't talk about for years. He later revealed he was molested in primary school by a Christian brother, a fact that sits like a hidden bruise behind his calm, even when he insisted it didn't traumatize him. That contradiction mattered. A child learns to swallow pain, then becomes an adult who can play silence like a weapon. He didn't enter screen acting early. He arrived when most careers are already set. Even so, he forced attention through presence, not glamour. And after Braveheart, he proved he could lead, not just support. In Bruges turned him into a cult icon, and his later work in the Harry Potter films stamped him into global pop culture. Awards followed the credibility. An Emmy win for portraying Winston Churchill in Into the Storm confirmed he wasn't the big Irish guy. He was a serious actor who could dominate a frame with stillness. His private life, unlike many of his peers, didn't explode in tabloids. But it wasn't weightless. Married to Mary Weldon since 1982, raising 4 sons, he built a home that stayed intact while fame tried to pull it apart, and he carried the responsibility of being both father and working actor in an industry that never guarantees the next job. That steadiness became part of the story. He didn't chase scandal, he chased work, and the work kept getting heavier, darker, more precise. As of 2026, Brendan Gleeson is 71 years old and still working at the top tier, choosing roles that feel like moral arguments rather than easy paychecks. His estimated net worth is around $8 million, built on decades of steady prestige work rather than blockbuster vanity. What shocks people isn't that he lasted, it's that he grew stronger with age, turning old wounds into performances that feel like truth. Catherine McCormack as Murren, the love that ignites William Wallace's war in Braveheart, was played by Catherine McCormack. At 23 years old, she became the emotional fuse of the entire film. Without her, Wallace is only a fighter. With her, he becomes a man with a reason to burn the world down. For McCormack's career, the role was a brutal blessing. Born on April 3, 1972, in Epsom, Surrey, England, she was raised Roman Catholic, shaped by convent discipline and strict moral rules that didn't bend easily. Then childhood turned sharp. Her mother died of lupus when Catherine was only 6, and her steelworker father suddenly had to hold the family together for her and her brother. Loss arrived as a fact that rewired the household, forcing maturity into a child's body. That grief hardened into focus, and focus pushed her into acting training rather than comfort. The cost of entering film was immediate. Her early screen work left her feeling exposed and unsupported, and she later admitted her first major job was miserable because the environment didn't protect a young actress learning on the job. After Braveheart, she moved carefully. Dangerous Beauty gave her sensual intelligence, Spy Game put her beside bigger stars without letting her disappear, and she kept returning to theater, where she could control the craft more than the machinery. Her personal life stayed mostly out of reach. Reports indicated she lived with a boyfriend around 2009, and there were no public marriage headlines to carry her name. That silence became part of the narrative, a woman famous for being the reason a man goes to war, choosing not to wage her own life in public. Instead, she kept working in stage productions and screen roles that didn't require her to be Muron forever. As of 2026, Catherine McCormack is 54 years old and continues acting with the same pattern: selective, theater-leaning, and allergic to noise. Her estimated net worth is around $3 million, consistent with a career built on craft and restraint rather than non-stop commercial exposure. The heartbreak isn't that she vanished. It's that one perfect role made the world demand a myth from a woman who preferred to stay human. Angus Macfadyen as Robert the Bruce. Robert the Bruce, the conflicted noble torn between loyalty and compromise in Braveheart, was played by Angus Macfadyen. At 32 years old, he embodied the film's moral counterweight to William Wallace, giving the story its most painful internal struggle. The role defined Macfadyen's screen identity. Born on September 21, 1963 in Glasgow, Scotland, Macfadyen spent his childhood moving across continents due to his father's work as a World Health Organization doctor. Growing up in the Philippines, Africa, Singapore, and France meant constant displacement, unstable friendships, and a lingering sense of not fully belonging anywhere. That rootlessness shaped his emotional range early, forcing adaptability but also planting quiet isolation. Education finally anchored him back in Britain, where structure replaced motion. His career gained momentum before Braveheart, but never exploded afterward in the way many expected. He followed the film with ambitious but uneven projects, finding cult recognition rather than mainstream stability. Equilibrium later gave him a sharp ideological presence, while Saw 3 unexpectedly tied his name to a major commercial franchise. Professionally, Macfadyen carried a reputation for seriousness without protection from industry volatility. Some films flopped, others gained cult status years later, and the shadow of Robert the Bruce lingered longer than awards ever did. He returned to the role decades later in Robert the Bruce, 2019, co-writing the script himself. As of 2026, Angus Macfadyen is 63 years old and continues to work steadily across film and television, choosing character-driven roles over visibility. His estimated net worth is around $5 million, built from long-term persistence rather than peaks. Brian Cox as Argyle Wallace. Argyle Wallace, William Wallace's uncle and first moral compass in Braveheart, was played by Brian Cox. At 49 years old, he grounded the epic with authority and restraint, shaping the hero before the rebellion even began. Though brief, the role connected Cox's classical gravitas to a global audience and strengthened the film's generational weight. Born on June 1, 1946 in Dundee, Scotland, Cox's childhood was defined by loss and instability. His mother suffered severe mental illness, and his father died of pancreatic cancer when Brian was just 8 years old. Raised largely by his older sisters in a working-class Catholic household, survival replaced comfort early. That upbringing hardened discipline, but left emotional scars that would later surface in his performances. Long before Braveheart, Cox had already mastered the stage, earning respect as a Shakespearean actor and winning Laurence Olivier Awards. Film recognition arrived slowly but decisively. Manhunter proved his intensity, Troy reinforced his authority, and decades later Succession finally placed him at the center of cultural conversation. His personal life mirrored complexity rather than calm. 2 marriages ended in divorce before he rebuilt stability later in life, carrying family responsibility alongside an unforgiving profession. That tension became part of his public identity. As of 2026, Brian Cox is 80 years old and remains professionally active, moving fluidly between stage, screen, and voice work. His estimated net worth is around $15 million, accumulated across 6 decades of relentless labor rather than sudden stardom. The emotional weight of his career lies not in success, but endurance. They once brought Braveheart, 1995, to life, but time claimed them far too quietly. Behind those unforgettable faces were real lives marked by struggle, sacrifice, and endings many fans never saw coming. Their performances live on, even as their voices are gone. Which Braveheart actor's fate shocked you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more untold stories behind the legends we lost.